Welcome to Strength to Overcome, where we explore faith, pursue truth, and grow stronger together. I'm Matthew Morton. Let's dig in. G'day everyone, welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. I am Matthew Morton, your host, and today we are doing something we have never done before. I have spent 56 wonderful episodes building a reputation, and today I am about to put it all on the line. Joining me all the way from Australia, still living in Melbourne, the city where I was born, and apparently the world's most livable city, coming in at a generous 5 foot on stilts, with a fighting weight of about 100 pounds dripping wet, but someone who has spent her entire life punching well above that weight. And today's episode is going to highlight some of that never say die attitude. So, as the host, I'm going to do my absolute best to regulate today's conversation, make it a fair fight. I'm going to keep it friendly. I'm going to keep it family G-rated as best I can, and hope that somewhere in between a podcast and a family reunion we can pull this off. But there are no guarantees that I can keep this guest in her lane. It is an absolute honor to welcome a very special, a very rare guest to Strength to Overcome. It is my sister, who is older. She is uglier. She is grayer. But thankfully, far kinder, far more generous, and infinitely more patient than her younger brother. Nay, welcome to the show. And before we get started, I've got to be honest, I've got more notes today than I've ever had before, more notes than a post-it warehouse. And for those that are watching on YouTube, before we get into it, I'm going to be doing my best with the Australian humour. Now, I'm wearing my Aussie cut-off, which I believe was given to me by my guest. And I've also got my girl dad mug here full of the good stuff, because I don't know if I'm going to need to stay awake. And I've also got my Aussie Matt water bottle full of electrolytes, because we don't know where this could end up in the Florida heat. Now, you and I have spoken thousands of times, and during the preparation for this episode, I realized that I still have questions that I genuinely wanted to ask you. So, before we get anything out of you, I would absolutely love to have a full uncut version of this that I could release, because I honestly don't know where it's going. So today, we're just going to let the conversation unfold as naturally as it needs to happen, somewhere in amongst all the laughs, the memories, maybe a few tears. Hopefully we can create something that brings value to everybody listening. So with no further words, Nay, welcome to Strength to Overcome.
Well, that was an interesting intro that I really did not expect. And if we're not pulling punches, look out.
Well, I appreciate that. You've never pulled a punch before, so don't start now. So what I thought we'd do, I do believe, just to get a baseline here, this is your very first podcast being on one, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. All right. And just to make sure that we create that baseline, almost as if like a singer going on stage wants to, me kind of thing, or like a lie detector test. I've just got a couple of questions that I want to make sure we get that baseline set up on, right? So, are you still living in Melbourne, Australia?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, good answer. All right, it's an honest one. All right, now it's very much rated the world's most livable city, and you're still living just a few miles down the street from where you grew up on Risdon Drive. Is that correct?
Correct.
Excellent. All right, now let's get to the big question everybody's already had. Now, it looks like I've got this hair going, right? I've got the undercut, which I had back in the 80s and 90s. And so now I look at it and I'm either decades behind the trend or I've been years ahead of my time. So what's happening in Australia right now? Is everybody looking at this thinking I've completely lost my mind, or am I current?
Well, kind of in between because everyone's rocking the maybe a little bit of the undercut, but more the man bun. So what they'll actually do is they'll do the full bun at the back. And I got to
Uh,
say, yeah, I'm not a fan. Sorry.
okay, well, listen, I'm going to press on regardless. We have a contract, and I'm going to fulfill it. But you're off to a bad start there. Okay, now growing up, I obviously started my carpentry career when I was 16, and during the first weeks in the business, I had senior tradesmen that would look at me and say, "Hey, can you grab the left-handed hammer?" And of course, you think you know they're joking, but you're not sure. Now,
Uh,
given your career as a dog groomer and you are left-handed, can you just put everyone's thoughts to rest here? Are there left-handed scissors?
Absolutely, there are, except there weren't when I started grooming. So I started grooming with right-handed scissors, and I actually can't use left-handed scissors now.
Interesting. Okay, so it's true. Good. I like
It's
it.
true.
And now 3 of the 5 Morton kids, all 3 girls in our family,
Mm-hmm.
are left-handed, southpaws, cack-handed as we call it. And obviously, my oldest, Callie, is also a southpaw. So do left-handed people secretly know something that the rest of us don't?
Absolutely.
Is that something that we can put on air, or is that to remain a secret?
Well, then it wouldn't still be a secret.
Okay, enough said. I feel like you've already spoken with your lawyer before we did this, and just for the
Yeah.
audience sake, none of it's scripted. She doesn't know what I'm throwing at her. So, before we get into the real serious stuff, which hopefully adds a lot of value to our audience, one final question to get our baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your favorite brother that lives in America? Keep thinking.
Well, I guess that's got to be you since there are no other brothers in
Okay,
America.
no need to clarify the answer. The answer is me, and let's get on with it. I appreciate you opening up there, and I've got a lot of really, hopefully, good questions here that have been on my heart for a long time. And I know that, like I just mentioned, you haven't seen this list of questions. In fact, you haven't seen any of my opening there at all. You've jumped on willingly and blindly. So just go ahead and tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in a family with 5 kids.
Well, can I just pause that a little bit and go back to your carpentry career and how the guys were messing with you? I just
Absolutely.
want to take that one step further and give myself a little bit of credit for your carpentry skills and career path because I remember as a kid, we had to share a Mars bar between the two of us. You were in charge of actually cutting that Mars bar in half because there was no way known I was getting an 15th more of that Mars bar than you. So you took charge of cutting that in half, and then you would actually sit the two halves together and literally measure them to the point where they were so even, no one was getting extra. And I take credit for that measurement skill.
Interesting. Now, honestly, when you said the Mars bar being halved, I do remember I got it down to the point where I didn't even measure it. I would just cut it, and then I'd spin the 2 halves next to each other, and they'd be identical. Is that true?
That rings a bell.
Honestly, if you hadn't have brought that up, I would have gone to my grave never having remembered that. But you are right. That was a good moment there, and I don't know that the same courtesy would be extended today. So
Pretty sure it wouldn't be.
no, definitely not. So that's a memory you have of me. But what about, obviously, for the audience that doesn't know, you're about 20 months older than me, which is the difference between my 2 girls. And
Yep.
then there's an older brother that's a couple of years older than you. And
Uh-huh.
then there's a
Yep.
big gap between 3, 4, and 5 from 1 and 2. So give me your
Yep.
perspective on growing up in that crew.
Well, it was actually interesting because it was kind of like so the two eldest sisters were kind of almost well, the eldest was kind of like having another mother. And that was quite interesting. That had its own challenges, but I guess that was still okay because she was a mother but a sister. She got to push me around a little bit, but she also got to look after me a little bit too. So that was cool. And then the other sister became more of a friend than a sister and somebody that I could look up to. And she was doing all the cool stuff when I was still too young to be allowed to do the cool stuff. So I guess that was good. And then my older brother, Rod, he was, I don't know, he was kind of just doing his own thing, just minding his own business a lot of the time.
You know, it's funny you'd say that because when I look at the lineup, I've done some research and looked into the birth order of families, and the stereotypes exist because quite often they've got a lot of truth to them. But when I look at the scenario, in both cases, you could look at the first two being sort of separate, and then you've got the next three that rolled out. I think, the
Right.
oldest were like, 11 and 9 or 12 and 10 or something, and then mum and dad rolled out three more after that back to back. And so
Right.
you became the middle child in the last three, and you've also become a bit of a middle child in the family as well, which is stereotypical that you're the peacemaker, you're the one that can kind of see the opportunity and everyone's potential and boost them and pick them up. You play a different role than everybody else. Did you feel that growing up, or is it something you've looked back on now, or is it even true now?
I guess I felt it a little bit growing up. I didn't try to get in between you and Rod when you two were fighting. I'm just like, that's not my problem. That's between you two boys because I was not big enough to get in the middle of that. So as far as peacekeeping with that went, I tried to stay out of that a little bit. I guess the peacekeeping probably came a little bit later, maybe as an adult more so. And you and I grew up so close in age that we were best friends. So we did everything together. So if we weren't punching on, which didn't happen often, we were doing stuff together, playing together. So I kind of had a built-in best friend with my younger brother.
Yeah, we had some great days, and we could definitely make a whole episode about the stuff we got up to. But what do you remember about the childhood that I've probably forgotten?
Let me think. Well, I mean, getting back to the challenges of having so many siblings, it was a small house. It was one toilet, one bathroom. You really learnt how to share, how to be respectful of other people's time, and I guess memories. A lot of memories involve you, Rod, and I. Not so much the older sisters. So much they were kind of out doing their own thing a lot. Um, our older sister got married when I was 11. I was a flower girl, so that kind of it was interesting because it's almost like two generations in the one house, almost.
Yeah, and I think from memory, and help me get this right, but didn't the three of us have or share a room until
Oh
goodness,
yes. Oh
could
my
you help me remember
goodness.
how long? And it was a small room too. I mean, we're talking about a
Right.
house that I believe was no more than 1,000 square feet for those in America and 10 square in Australia, right? Ballparking it,
Mm,
but
small.
pretty small home. And from memory, we shared a bedroom, and I think I've got photos. I don't have many photos, but I've got photos of me in a cot when I was, definitely old enough to have my own bed, but I don't think I got one.
You know what? You and I probably shared a cot for a while. I don't know. But we
You know what?
definitely shared a bedroom. I don't think I got my own bedroom until I was maybe 11 or 12. So
And that's
sharing with
when,
you boys was quite interesting.
so you didn't get your own room until Ish moved out. Is that right? And then we
Yes.
built an extension on the house,
Yes.
I believe. And the boys
That's
went one
right.
way and you got your own room, right?
That's right. So sharing with boys up until you're kind of almost developing as a girl, probably not ideal. And the funny thing is, these days it would probably be frowned upon. But
Yeah, I'm
that's
sure
just
mum
how
and
it
dad have
was
been
back then,
taken off by the CPS, right? They'd be
right?
carted off in the back of a divvy van. But I don't think I got my own room until I got married.
And then you still didn't get your own room. You had to
I
share,
still didn't get my own room. Boy, nothing's
right?
really changed, has it? So what was I like as a kid? What do you remember of me? Because I don't remember me very much, to be honest with you.
Honestly, I remember you as the happy-go-lucky kid most of the time. You were definitely probably the most outgoing of the bunch, the loudest, the one that's going to get the attention in a crowd. Nothing's really changed. You also, I tell you what, one thing that I really got my goat about you was if we got into a fight, I would get so mad. I would go to my room and I'd be in there for hours, either crying or just, as we say, sulking. And you'd go to your room, you'd put yourself to bed, and then literally 5 minutes later, you would come out whistling. And I would hear you, tiny house, you'd come out whistling and you'd be carrying on in the kitchen. And I'd be like, how does he get to be so happy now? I'm mad. Why is he happy? So I think you were just that happy-go-lucky kid that nothing really fazed you for too long. You got over it pretty quick.
That's interesting. I don't really recall that. And I've tried to have that disposition my whole life, but obviously, as I've shared through previous episodes, that hasn't always been the case, and it's not always been easy. But I do find myself enjoying who I am when I am able to do that. Now, the goal would be to not have the fight in the first place, but for those out there that
Wow.
know or have been married, you get it. And if you've got little kids, of course, that's always a challenge too. But what do you think mum and dad were worried about the most back then? Because a small home, you got a lot of kids. They obviously didn't know how to use protection or something of that nature. But it seems like as a
Can we
parent
not
now,
go there?
with two kids, I'm thinking, man, how did they pull it off? What do you think they went through? What do you think they worried about the most?
Well, I'm not concerned Dad worried about anything terribly much. I mean, that's terrible, but he was pretty chill. He went off to work and did his thing and left Mum pretty much in charge of a lot of it. Like Mum was the disciplinarian. Although having said that, at the end of the day, if she was really mad, she'd say, "Wait till your father gets home." And he'll throw you out the window without opening it first. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of it was on Mum. She was the only one that drove, so Dad wasn't allowed to drive because of his eyesight wasn't good enough. So I think a lot of it really came down to Mum. And I think back now and I think, I don't know how she did it. 5 kids, she was the only one that drove. She worked as well. I honestly don't know how she did it. And I think her biggest thing was keeping her kids involved in something worthwhile enough that we wouldn't look for trouble anywhere else. That was probably her biggest worry.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, as you say, growing up in Australia, we were talking about a vehicle no larger than a Toyota Corolla. We're talking a 4-door sedan, small. And I watch families these days, and I'm in that same bucket where you've got this SUV, it's got a third row, and you've seen it,
Yep.
where you've got room for other kids, you've got room for other kids and bikes and other stuff even behind the third row. And I've only got 2, and I'm always running out of room. So back in the day, Mum was doing it for a period of time before the older sisters were driving, 5 kids in a car, plus
Mm-hmm.
that, and a vehicle no larger than I think it was a Holden. What was it? A Holden Gemini?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
I'm
And
sure it was something before that, but that's as far back.
somebody must have ended up in the boot because there's actually not enough room for all those people.
And I think if we had Ish on or Dee, the older sisters in the family, they might remember that we probably had a vehicle with a bench in it at some point. But I remember the 4-door sedan that was tiny, and I don't know how she pulled it off. I think today's times, if you have that many people in with no seatbelts, Mum would have been taken off into either the loony bin or the concrete hotel. So I think we got away with it being back in the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
but it probably wouldn't fly today. So who do you think out of all the siblings was the biggest pain in your ass?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start with that. Look, you and I were pretty good most of the time. Although having said that, you and Rod were probably the ones that actually physically hurt me the most. So Rod would actually punch me. You, on the other hand, used to bite. So I think a
Ooh.
bite is actually worse than a punch.
And
Yeah.
for those that are
So-
listening and not watching, out of all 5 kids, I'm the only one that didn't get braces. So when we talk about biting, we're talking about some wild animal grabbing grabbing lunch out of a tree, right? And just kind of
Right,
gnawing.
right.
I've got fangs over here. So
I I think Rod was probably the one I was scared of the most because he probably had the worst temper.
yeah, I apologize for biting. I've got kids now that do stuff when I look at them and just wonder, where the hell did you get that from? Well, now I'm getting
Mm.
some of those answers.
And karma.
Yeah, a little bit for sure.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
do you think then that siblings are supposed to challenge each other and create a little bit of that friction?
Oh, absolutely. Because the thing is that with siblings, you figure out pretty quickly what the boundaries are, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And you know what? Each person will have a different boundary. And it's up to you to figure out what that boundary is. You learn what buttons you can push to get them to that boundary. And then hopefully you learn not to do that again. Um, and you know what? You can do that with siblings better than you can with other people out in the world because the siblings will tolerate it to a certain extent and then they'll give you a thump. Out in the real world, but at the end of the day, you will be friends again. Out in the real world, you push someone's buttons that bad that they get to that boundary and you're done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think now for the first time I've ever really thought about this, but as I watch my youngest, Chloe, take some of the beatings and, the attention from the oldest one, this just seems to be in every, you know, youngest, oldest relationship. I think
Yep.
back to the fact that for 20 months of your life, you were the youngest and probably got a lot of that attention, or at least more. And then I came along very soon after and probably stole some of the limelight. Did that impact you as you grew up and saw any of that? I know we've often sat around the table when everyone argues about who was the favorite, who was the this, who was the that. What's your opinion on that from a very authentic, honest vantage point?
Oh, do you actually want the honest truth? I
Yeah,
mean,
uncut, baby. Uncut. Let me have it.
uncut, uncut. All right. Well, so I reckon you got most of Mum's time. That plain and simple. You came along, you were the baby. So Mum was actually the youngest in her family. She was the baby. So I think she naturally gravitated towards you because she felt that as the youngest herself, she probably got the raw end of the deal with the least amount of attention from her mum, and her dad was AWOL when she was really young. So I think she felt the need to protect you and to give you that extra attention so that what happened to her didn't happen to you.
Yeah, it's powerful. I appreciate you sharing that because growing up, you just experience your life without really ever processing it. And now, as we sort of dig in on some of this, we've had some of these conversations over the years, but it kind of hits you a little bit harder now as I have been a dad for 6 years and I watch what's happening with my 2 girls. And I often think, what would it look like if I had another kid where now Coco would become the middle child? And that
Mhm.
would be kind of what happened to you a little bit. And I know you guys have always sort of said maybe I was the favorite, but I've often questioned, well, was I the favorite or did I just have a lot in common with mum? I'm not sure if as a puzzler and jigsaws and
Mhm.
Scrabble and things, I know mum loved that and I did too. So I've always kind of looked at it from that perspective, but it makes sense what you're saying because I didn't really think through until just now that if mum was the youngest and didn't get a lot of attention, that she was sensitive enough to make the adjustment in her parenting to make sure I did. But that probably in turn meant you kind of, out of the last 3, became this middle forgotten child. Did that feel like that? Or looking back, does it feel like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, it hurt. Now I can kind of see it from an adult perspective. And like I said, mum was protecting you and making sure you got the attention. But as a kid, you don't see it that way. All you see is, oh, he's getting all that attention. So Rod and Dad were close. They always watched something at night together on the TV. So they were always, doing something. You and Mum were always puzzling or whatever. So I did feel a little bit left out, I guess. But having said that, I then became an avid reader and I lost myself in books. And I have always loved books because no matter what else is going on in your life, there's a book, there's a story, there's something else to get lost in, there's a crime to solve, or, there's a love triangle to read about. There's always something else. So I think Mum loved reading. She was a librarian. But I think also that really honed in my reading skills and love of that because I felt I had time solo to do that. So, as a kid, you're like, oh, this hurts. As an adult, you look back and go, yes, but that brought me to where I am today.
Well, that's funny because I was just thinking about when you were out here last year, we went to the Goodwill bookstore. And for those in Australia, did you have a Goodwill over there?
Would call it an op shop.
An op shop, okay, but an op shop, but a bookstore version of an op shop, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we went there looking for a particular novel, and you went in. We found that particular novel fairly quickly, if I recall correctly. And about 2 hours later, you walked out with a box of 30 books. Am I right? Somewhere. I mean, might be exaggerating, but that was the sort of.
That's right. And I actually, I said, somebody stop me. And I tried to put some back because I'm like, I've got one suitcase to get home. I'm not buying another suitcase because I'm buying books.
So there you go. That explains a little bit about what happened last visit that you had out here, which is fantastic. So moving into your recollection of the siblings better than I can, even though it was only 20 months, you've been in Australia longer. What is one thing that you've admired about one of your siblings that you've never told them?
Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to go with Ish just because, I don't want to pander to you, it's your podcast.
Please don't. Please don't.
We'll go with Ish.
You probably told me everything, so.
Probably. I mean, no secrets, Ish is, she's very much into giving to charity, whether it be her time, whether it be her money, whether it be her skills of painting and gardening. She is forever doing some sort of work to help other people.
Yeah, definitely. She's got a lot of skills, a lot of creative skills, and a screw it attitude. Once things get started, once the bucket of paint's open, nobody's sleeping until that place is finished. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I mean, with that comes the music, comes the chats that you're like, where did that even come from? Like, I don't know, I'm just here trying to help you paint, and all of a sudden we're getting into something deep. It's like, where did that even come from? So, a simple painting job can turn into some deep and meaningful conversation, or family memories, or how we felt about something Mum said or did, or how we grew up. It's just amazing what goes on with over a bucket of paint.
So, out of your recollection, has there ever been a time where one of your siblings really showed up for you?
I would say, well, I mean, there's several. Where do I even start? I'll start with you. My first ever car accident on my way to work. It was a Sunday, so you were at home, and I was traumatized. I'm like, what even just happened? And I've managed to somehow limp the car home, and there you are. And you're like, you just came out, gave me a hug, and you said, I've got the day free. It's a Sunday. What do you want to do? So we ended up just watching movies at home. You made me laugh. You probably made me lunch. You probably gave me some of your ice cream. I don't exactly remember the details. I just remember my first car accident, you were there. So I don't even know if you remember that.
I absolutely have no idea what you're talking about.
There you go.
I honestly thought that as we go through today, you'd bring up some stuff and kind of like the Mars bar. I remember that.
Right.
But I have absolutely lost complete contact with what you've just described. I don't remember that at all.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we might be recording early onset here. We'll get into that later with mum and dad losing their brains, but I don't remember that at all. But I'm glad I was there for you and that you remember it.
Um,
We
another
hit some
instance you
stuff.
were there for me, and I mean, I don't know how far we're going with this, but I remember both of us were getting bullied at one stage by this kid that was probably, I don't know, a year or so younger than you, and we'd had enough one particular day, and we just looked at each other, and we somehow just, I don't know, we had this connection. We just knew what each other was thinking, and I remember you picked him up under the arms. I picked him up under the feet, and we kind of heaved him over a tiny brick fence into somebody's front yard.
Yes, that I do remember. It was on the walk from Nunawading train station, if I'm
Yep,
not mistaken,
yep, yep,
to the
yep.
school.
Uh-huh.
And I've shared a little bit about the bullying growing up, and I didn't get my height. I was 125 pounds and 5 foot nothing in like 8th, 9th, 10th grade. I didn't grow till I left school, and so I was a target,
Right,
which I've shared a little bit about in previous episodes. But I do remember that specific
right.
moment where he ended up over the fence.
Uh-huh. Right. I mean, I'm allowed to bully you as a sister. I can say what I want about you, but no one else can.
That's kind of like Australia and New Zealand, right? If we're playing each other
Right.
in a sport, all hell's going to break loose. But if another country's picking on them, you better back the hell up because that's my little brother, right?
Exactly right.
And
Don't
for
go
those
there.
in America, that's America and Canada type thing. There's a huge
Right.
rivalry, but the minute there's someone else involved, you better back up. And so I think that's probably what happened in that case. So I don't remember the car accident, but I do remember that. That's fantastic. Well, give me give me
All
one
right.
from someone else then
All
that
right. All right.
you specifically remember really. And again, I've been gone a long time, so it would be kind of cool for you to share something that maybe I've completely missed, seeing I've been in and out of the US since '98, so I've been gone nearly 30 years.
Yep, yep. All right. Well, yeah, I've got more. So, I guess Ish, the eldest, she saw me in a situation where I was renting a house and paying an absolute fortune renting, and she came to me and she's like, "You know what? You got to stop this renting gig. I mean, you could afford a mortgage. Why don't you get yourself a mortgage, go to the bank, get yourself a loan, and buy yourself a house?" And I'm like, "That is impossible. I'm self employed. I live on my own. No one's going to touch that. No bank is going to give me a cent, let alone how much I need for a house." Um, Her husband is an accountant. And so she set me up with him on the phone and she's like, "Talk to Andrew. He will talk you through it. He'll tell you what to do, how to do it, how to make this work. He will give you a budget. He'll look at all your figures." Anyway, so she set all that up. I talked to Andrew, and with all of his information and guidance, I went to the bank and, well, to start with, they laughed at me. Secondly, I went to a broker, which was another one of his ideas, and I got myself a loan and I bought a house. And without their encouragement, that never would have happened. I didn't think it was possible.
I actually do remember that because that was a long time ago, and for memory, I think last time we talked about this, you're pretty close to paying that thing off, right?
Just under 3 years to go.
And so everybody over here knows that when you buy a house, it's a 30-year loan. I don't know how it is in Australia anymore, been gone
Yep,
so long, but
same.
we're talking about something that happened nearly 3 decades ago, and you've probably paid it off quicker than that, I'm assuming, but we're talking about something that happened decades ago, and I do remember him jumping in, helping you out, and that process has changed your life. And over the next couple of years, as you do finish that mortgage out, at your age, right? You're only
Mhm.
20 months older than me, right? You haven't quite hit
Yep.
that 50 yet, right? So you're going to be a homeowner in a really nice area, not too far out from town, and
Mhm.
that blessing of them just pushing you a little bit and encouraging you. And yeah, remember, this is a time that long ago where we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet. A lot of this was really hard work to pull off. And so that's pretty cool to remember that. That's actually going to set you up for, well, a major head start on, the second 50 years of your life.
Absolutely. And along with that came the fact that when I did buy the house, it needed a few things being done. I mean, back to the painting, it needed painting. It needed trees ripped out. It needed some mulching and some gardening, all of that sort of stuff. So along with the, Ish flew down. The second that, the house was mine and I had the keys, Ish flew down and she came down to paint and do some gardening. And Rod actually came over with his, I think it was it was a Subaru, I think. And I wanted a tree pulled out of the front yard. And I'm like, how exactly are we removing this tree? Roots and all. So Rod, in his brilliant wisdom and all the different ideas and ways he's got to do on things, he got a rope. He put it around the bottom of the tree, grabbed his Subaru, put the rope on the end of his Subaru, and just yanked the hell out of that tree with the Subaru. Just drove off with it attached down the road.
Only Dilly, I call him Dilly, but
Yeah.
only Rod would do that and be able to fix whatever damage he did to the car after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's still got the bumper attached. I can't remember.
That's great. I can see him pulling off down the street now with this giant tree or tree stump bouncing around behind him
Right.
with half the half the towing system stuck in the roots. Classic Dilly. Oh, that's great stuff. So
I got the keys, and see, this is brilliant. All right, this is what siblings are actually for. So I got the keys. I worked every day, bar Saturdays at that stage. So Ish came down. I think she spent a week down here. Every day, I went off to work 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd get home at 5:30 at night. I'd come home. They'd probably both still be here doing stuff. And I'd take photos because I'm like, this house has changed. 8 hours ago, this room wasn't painted. 8 hours ago, these little trees weren't here. So they went and bought me some little bushes and planted some little flowers and, all of that sort of stuff. 8 hours ago, my letterbox was a different color with no numbers on it. So I'd come home every day to something different. And probably at the end of the week when Ish went home, I literally didn't have to do anything. Everything was done free of charge. Between the two of them, they worked their butts off. And I went to work and made money.
Yeah, and that's something they've continued to do, not just for family members or siblings, but for their own kids and their own neighbors, people at church, people around the world. I mean, they've traveled extensively and they've done this type of stuff for months at a time, and it's definitely a skill that she has. And just, good luck to anybody that gets in her way when she's in that mood.
Oh, don't.
And the same with Dilly, right? If you call him and need something done that's a little bit like Tim the Toolman Taylor. Remember that show, Home Improvement?
Right.
We'll figure out a way to do it, with some duct tape and WD-40. But it really does highlight, that she stood in and did that. And if I was there, I would have loved to have done it. So, kudos to Ish, Dilly, for stepping up, and Andrew and Robin, right? The extended family there.
Yeah, Rob was there as well.
They played a huge role in that, to be able to pull that off while you're gone. And at the end of the week, ask for nothing in return.
Yeah, exactly.
Is something that siblings definitely do for each other. So what do you think is one thing that only siblings, can teach each other? You can't get it from anywhere else. Friends, neighbors, besties. What's one thing that you think only siblings can teach each other?
Oh, wow. Let me think on that for a second.
This is how you know it's not scripted, because you don't have a ready-made answer for it.
I don't have a ready answer.
Fine. I've completely thrown you out there under the bus.
Absolutely. Yep. I guess at the end of the day, it probably comes back to what we can teach each other is how to love each other in a way that nobody else can. I mean, your friends can love you, but they haven't loved you as long. Even the friends that you've had as reasonably young kids aren't going to love you the same way as your family do. At the end of the day, most of the time, family is family, and whatever happens, you can get past it. Now, that's not always the case. It's not always true. Every family has issues, and we've certainly been through ours. But at the end of the day, I think you learn a love through siblings that you cannot get anywhere else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As I think through, obviously, my wife Heather, she's an only child, and there are some times where, and you and I have discussed this, and I've discussed it with Heather, and you've discussed it with Heather, but there are just some things that growing up as a family of five is different than growing up as an only child, and that's not good, bad, ugly, better, worse. It's just different.
Mm. And
So
and you share these memories that, again, you share memories with childhood friends, but they weren't there every day. I mean, did you share a bath every night with your childhood friends?
yeah,
Did
sadly,
you
we
share?
we did do that, didn't we?
Uh, Disgustingly, yes. There was three of us in a bath together to save water.
Yeah, and it's
So
okay when I do it with my kids because they're sorry, I
both
broke up
girls.
there a little bit.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just listen, for the audience out there, we're talking about, what are we, 14 hours apart here. We're doing pretty good. So I apologize for the audience if we've spoken over each other there at all. But I was just saying that I've got two girls that are 20 months apart. A little bit different having them in the tub together than two boys and a middle sister. So, we'll leave that one there. But hey, that's how things were done in the 70s and 80s. I think everybody that's old enough would be like, yeah, hell yeah, that's how we did it, and that's how you get it done. We're not running three different baths, right?
Right.
All right, so let's go back. I did touch on this just a little bit, and I want to get your perspective on this. But back in '98, I visited America for the very first time, and that was something that kickstarted my eventual move here in 2003. I went back and forth for a few years there in between, but officially back in 2003. So I've been gone quarter of a century. But back then, back in '98, and those first early years of me doing that, I originally I left Melbourne and got to Brisbane, and then eventually left Brisbane. What was that like for you, watching that as someone that yes, we were close, we were besties for a lot of that. What was that like from your perspective?
Actually, it was really tough. I felt like I was losing my best friend. So I guess at that age, I wasn't thinking about your needs and what you needed to do for your life. At that age, I'm just like, why the heck are you moving away? Aren't I enough? Like, where are you going? What are you doing? You're leaving me.
Yeah, that's tough because I know I left Melbourne in 2001, 2002, and moved
Mhm.
to Brisbane, and then was in Brisbane for a couple of years before I ended up moving to America. And I've often remembered a time when I was, what was I, 12, 13, I don't remember exactly, but I remember Ish coming to me. I remember the playground. I was sitting there and she came to me and said, "We've got something to tell you." And that's when they had my nieces, uh,
Mhm. Uh-huh.
Buddy and Chalk. I can't remember their real names. They've been Buddy and Chalk for 30 something years. But anyway, she came and told me that they were moving to Brisbane, and I was absolutely gutted. And as you
Mhm.
shared your
Mhm.
story there, it just reminded me a little bit of maybe how I felt because I was close to Ish, I was close to, Dog Breath, Andrew, and the girls, I was like a big brother to them, and I was devastated. But then a few years later, I moved up there myself. And so now I look back and I listen to your story and I have that same pit, not of regret or
Mhm.
guilt or shame, but just that same feeling that you had when you shared that. And I never really thought about it till I started preparing for this episode. And that's why the question's in there. How did you feel? I never really considered it until now. How did you feel? And so I appreciate you sharing that. And, there are times I wish that I hadn't left, but obviously my life wouldn't have taken the paths that it ended up taking had I not. So at the time or during that process, did you ever think I'd eventually just come home to Melbourne?
No, I figured once you're up from Brisbane with Ish and Dog Breath as you call him, I figured that was it. You were staying. I mean, you and Ish had a good relationship. You were like an older brother to the girls. I knew you weren't coming back, but I also knew that I was never moving up there.
And so did you think we would just slowly drift apart?
I actually did.
But there's probably been seasons where it has been a little bit distant. Again, this is a time when email was something you dialed into. Back
My
in '98, I
goodness.
remember going over to Delhi's, Rod's, and dialing in so that I could email America and back and forth and such at the time. And now we've got FaceTime. We're live in a studio now recording a podcast episode from around the world. And except for a couple of times where we're losing each other, it's pretty seamless. So, did you ever think that we would be here doing this type of thing together?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, technology these days is incredible. It's almost like we're in the same room.
Yeah, and I think the FaceTime's been great. My kids know that certain ringtone when the iPad starts, blinging, that
Oh,
it's you.
really?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
they
wow.
know. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Let me switch directions here so we can get through all of this.
All right.
Not because I'm not loving it, but this is exactly why I scripted it this way so that I had some way of keeping us on track. But I'd like to ask a question about the religious upbringing that we had and the expectations that denomination or that upbringing or that circle or those churches that we were part of, did you carry into your childhood from that upbringing? What expectations did you just assume were always going to unfold into your adulthood?
Well, I guess you probably call them expectations. I call them mm, boundaries and probably security levels. Because whilst you're, well, maybe not friends, but acquaintances from, say, workplaces or schools. So we went to a Christian school, but not everyone was from a Christian background. Um, and you would hear of things that people did on the weekend that you're like, you know what? We're not typically allowed to do. It's frowned upon. Um, whether that be out drinking, night clubbing as you got older, or just hanging around places that, were a bit dingy and people were doing graffiti and stuff like that. Well, we clearly weren't allowed to be doing anything like that. So I guess there were expectations. And back then it might have seemed a little hard depending on your tendencies and your friends and who you hung out with. But I guess looking back now, there were certainly safeguards. But yeah, I guess it was tough. One thing that I've always loved is music. So one thing I do remember is Mum forbidding us to listen to the radio. The only thing that we could listen to was Christian music. And that was either in the car with her when she was taking us somewhere and that was under her control, or it was Christian music that she had helped us buy or that our older siblings already had, so she knew what it was and what the content was. I do remember actually going out and buying my first cassette tape back then, and it was Bryan Adams, and Mum didn't like it. She actually found it in your room when you borrowed it, and she confiscated it. And and then I was dirty on you because you got it taken away from me.
I don't
So there
remember
were
that. I don't remember that at all. Can we go
so
to the
there
next
were
question? Your Honor, I don't remember that
right,
at all.
right. So there were
I'm gonna apologize.
definitely boundaries put in place that I tested. And I mean, I've always been a little bit like there's rules, But if I don't like the rules and they're stupid, I'm going to break them. But I also see that they were there for a purpose. So, yes, they were religious, but they also make common sense. Like, don't be out doing dumb stuff that could get you into trouble and ruin your life.
Yeah, I think I've often had this statement over the years, and I've trained a lot of teenagers and people I've tried to maybe mentor in at least some of the areas that I've learnt lessons from. But I say, listen, nothing really good happens after 10 o'clock.
Well, after midnight, Mum used to say, but 10 o'clock is
That's
probably
right.
more to the.
It's
Yeah.
funny you'd say that because as I've gotten older, I've changed it to 10 o'clock. But yes, nothing good happens after midnight was the phrase we were brainwashed with. And now I tell
Right.
anyone that wants to listen, I'm like, be home by 10, because all the
Mm.
accidents, all the drunks, all the stuff that goes wrong usually happens somewhere after 10 o'clock at night. So I think that
Right.
those boundaries, do make a difference. But at the
Yeah.
time, they were definitely hard. So what parts of your upbringing then were you actually grateful for?
Uh, Again, probably the safeguards. Like, Mum said, if you want to have a drink, if you want to try cigarettes, do it at home. Tell me you want to try it. Do it at home where I can keep an eye on you and make sure you're okay afterwards. Um, so I think that was good. I actually never really wanted to try that because my group of friends really was through the church, and so none of us did that. But on the one hand, Mum's like, please don't go and do these things without my knowledge. On the other hand, Mum always gave us things to do in place of that. So on one hand, she's like, don't be out at the nightclubs. On the other hand, she's like, all right, invite your friends around. What we're going to do is we're going to do a movie night. I'm going to feed everyone. We're going to do, I don't know, fish and chips or something. And we'll do popcorn and we'll do a movie night. Or, you know what? Let's all go to the local skating rink and we'll go roller skating. So there was always something in place. Mum was very proactive, giving us other things to do so that we weren't doing the things that she tried to avoid.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's good for me as a dad trying to figure out how to navigate the world we live in today. I think mum and dad would be horrified with some of the things that are
Mm.
going on now. And oh boy, I think they did a pretty good job of
Mm.
balancing what they were protecting us from and also what they did need to expose us to. Now, I know that you obviously raised in the same way I was, and then, life took a bit of a left turn for you. You obviously went through a divorce, which I've been through, and I'd never wish a divorce on anybody, but how did that I want to word it carefully because I've been through one
Mm.
too. So being raised in the Christian circles that we were, I think, at least from my perspective, I've got thoughts and things that I've battled with through my divorce. But how did the divorce shape or reshape your life because of that upbringing and then going through that?
Okay, so I guess that is one circumstance where the upbringing did impact me negatively. Um, Back when I got a divorce, it was 2001. And so in our church at that time, it was a no-go. You got married, you were married for life. And you know what? Ideally, yes, that is what marriage should be. It should be for life. But it's not always that simple. And I guess our upbringing, Mum was just like, so I was the first one in, I guess, our close family to get divorced. And I think it shocked the heck out of Mum. Mum's like, what do you mean you're not staying together? Like, you stay together. Mum's pretty much like, well, you know what? You made the decision to get married. You need to make the decision to go home and work on it and figure it out and stay married. So that was tough because I actually expected a little bit more sympathy, a little bit more support. Mum was quite supportive of everyone. Like, Mum was the empath. She was the one that everyone went to. So I just figured that I would also get that same empathy and concern, and I didn't. So that was tough. However, I didn't help myself by not telling her all the details. And I think had I told her all the details, I probably would have gotten that support a little bit more. And as far as the whole uh, Christian church side of things went, again, I found that hard because it was, well, one week you're married and you're turning up to church with your husband, and the next time you're coming without him and you're not wearing a wedding ring. So I actually avoided going to church for a while. That was my way of coping with it. I just didn't go. So that
So,
impacted me a lot.
so at what point did you realize that life doesn't go according to script?
Right about then, I think. Right about then. Up until then, it wasn't too bad. But you learn a little bit of resilience, and you learn to pick yourself up and keep going.
Now, how old were you? You said this was 2001, so you were what, 24, 25?
Yeah. Yep.
And so what, over the course of the second half of your life to this point, have you now seen and lived through that version of you, or that aged 24, 25-year-old version of you didn't understand at the time?
Oh, I guess you look back and you sort of think, all right, well, if I was smarter, I never would have married that particular person in the first place. So, I mean, you live and learn a little bit. But the second time round, you choose a little bit more carefully. You take a little bit more time. You get to know them a little bit better. Um, you figure out if your values and morals align a little bit more. You're a little bit more choosy. And you also realize that as an older person who's going into a second marriage with someone else who's going into a second marriage, that they're also a little bit more wary as well. So I guess the baggage that we both brought into a second marriage was that in some circumstances, if we weren't careful, we were projecting what our previous partners did to us onto that next person. And so we both at some stage had to say to each other, we are not who you were with the first time. Please don't project that onto me. So that was a really big learning curve of, you know what, just because one person did X, Y, Z and treated you a particular way doesn't mean that the next person is going to. Every person is different, and you can't, as they say, tar a different person with the same brush. So you've got to learn to. Also, another big thing is if something triggered your partner previously with their previous partner, you need to learn not to do that, to trigger them that same way, because they've got trauma from that previous marriage.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend an entire episode here, and I think growing up in a very tight Christian circle with expectations certainly threw me for a loop. And I've talked a little bit about that and the challenges that it took and the toll that it took on me, the guilt, the shame, the failure,
Right.
and then the things that you're told by elders or pastors or
Mhm.
family
Right.
friends. And we could get stuck there. But I do appreciate you sharing just a little bit. I'll let you off the hook on any more of that. But I do think of getting married again, and you've got an awesome man now. And of course, a lot of the times we marry our, the boys marry their mums, the girls marry their
Mm.
dad. And I think of dad in your situation, and we lost dad. Was it 2013? I think he was
Uh, yes,
83. So yeah,
2013. Mm.
2013. So from your perspective, as you went through that transition and years later, and losing dad, what changed after dad? After we lost dad in 2013. Now, obviously, he was in a home for years before that, so there was this separation there of who dad really was. But You were there, I wasn't. What changed for you once Dad was gone?
Well, for starters, he wasn't there to walk me down the aisle for my second marriage, which was tough. Uh, but apart from that, what changed was Dad and I had this real goofy relationship. I was his little girl, as you know, girls are with their dads, but Dad was funny. He would give me things and say, "Don't tell your mum." So he did some part-time work after he retired, and he had his own little bit of money. It wasn't earning a lot, but with that little bit of money, he would try to buy me things if he saw a need. So he would, like, one day he gave me a blanket because he thought I needed an extra blanket because it's freaking cold in Melbourne. So he gave me a blanket and he's like, "Don't tell your mum I spent my money."
Mm.
So there were those sort of things. Because he loved his biscuits, he would always buy me biscuits. If he loved biscuits, everyone loved biscuits. So he'd always buy me biscuits. So I just missed the little things. Talking football with him because you weren't here to talk football with.
Yeah.
Um, Dad brought us up with the football. He'd take us to the training days where they used to just, do their drills and stuff like that. And he'd sit there and we'd run around and talk to the players. And, Dad would sit there freezing cold while we ran around. So, I mean, little things like that, I just missed talking to him, just hanging out with him. We'd do jigsaw puzzles together. He was always goofy doing weird things and making me laugh. I really missed that.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked for a little while there because I was choking up. And even now, I'm thinking of my girls and just doing everything I can in my world to stay fit and healthy and strong. Because I started late too, and I want to make sure I'm there to be able to walk them down the aisle. And I realized I didn't come back for your wedding either,
No, I mean, the rudeness of that. Seriously,
which,
I would have
I,
had a brother on either side give me away, as it was
oh,
Rod gave me away. But where were you?
man, I'm taking a beating here on my own podcast. Uh,
Absolutely.
I I'll apologize now because these are questions I came up with that I wanted to have a discussion about that we've never actually talked about. And we've been, pretty close over the years. We've had our differences and time apart from communicating. But as you shared that, I just realized, you came to my second wedding or second marriage.
Hmm.
And, that was at a great cost to you and time away from work. And I didn't do it there. I think there are some times in my life where I've made some selfish decisions. And I'll apologize now for not coming back for yours. And, now being a dad of girls and understanding the nuances and what you were going through, I just say sorry and wish that I could go back and do it differently because I know that when Dad actually passed, I was on a plane the next day. I was home in 24 hours, and I'm sure at some level there's probably some level of sadness in what you're watching me do for when he's gone, but couldn't do while he was alive, and you were, in need of a brother there. So I apologize for that. I didn't really ever think that through until you just told me now and made that realization that I had not been there for you the way I would be now if it happened again. So I know it's,
Accepted.
I know it's probably how many years ago was that? When did you get?
Oh, 11 years ago?
All right. Well, I'm 11 years a little late, but you know what? Better late than never. And
All good. Water under the bridge.
yeah, I appreciate that. That'll sting me a little bit later on too. So I apologize again, but let's move on to Mum because I'm sure we're about to go through the same thing again. I've been in America for a long time and haven't really been back and forth a lot since 17 when I was last there. So we're coming up on a decade now. Walk me through some of the things that changed after Mum passed. I think that was it 22 or 23?
21.
Oh, geez, here I go. So I've
Mm.
just embarrassed myself. I've lost time. I said this to someone the other day over the phone. They said, "What have you been doing for the last 6 years?" I said, "I had two kids," and they said, "Enough said." And I almost
Right.
felt like finally someone understood that it's just a blur, and your day-to-day activities just seem to get lost in all the things that go into becoming a parent and just caring for them and looking after them and providing and trying to keep your marriage alive and look after the home and all these things. So I've just had that realization. You just did it to me again. 2021. So we lost mum 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And what changed for you? Because I know you were right with mum for a lot of that and moving into home and being right around the corner. That was something that I know a lot about, but I don't understand the feeling of it. Can you share with me and those listening what you went through and just some of the things that changed as, you know, mum was, entering her final days and then passed on?
Mhm. So before mum passed, we were doing Thursday night dinners together pretty much every week. It was a standard Thursday night thing. So once mum passed, my Thursday nights became very empty to start with. Um, so I'll back up the truck a little bit. So Thursday nights was dinner night and crosswords, usually. It was either crosswords or a game of skip bow, which is cards for those who don't know. But what mum would do would be weekly in the Sunday newspaper was a double page spread of a massive crossword. So what mum would do would be she'd buy the newspaper, she'd get that double page, she'd go and copy it at a printing place, and we would both sit and do the same crossword at the same time after dinner for a couple of hours. We could chat in between, so it wasn't that we were ignoring each other, but in a way, it was almost a race. It was still a little bit competitive. And I mean, we're talking, she's in her 70s, and generally speaking, it took us 2 weeks to get a crossword done that size. She would beat me every time. She was phenomenal. Her brain was just wired that way. She loved words, probably from her reading days. Being a librarian, she just loved words. So she would beat me hands down pretty much every time. But so Thursday night was a standard, that was our date night. Um, so that was probably what I missed the most when she was gone. Um, I also missed, I guess, her advice,
Mm.
her love of animals. So I've always had dogs, cats. I've been through numerous. So what I missed was her love of coming over, spending time with the animals. Sometimes she had her own key. So sometimes she'd actually message me during the day and I'd be at work and she'd be like, you know what? I just actually need to recharge a little bit. Do you mind if I just let myself into your house and go and hang out with your animals?
That's
I need some
beautiful.
cuddles. So that was her recharge. So she'd come over during the day. I'd be at work. This is before I was married sometimes. And she would just hang out with my animals. So I guess I missed her love of that because I've had some since that I would love to have shared with her.
Mm.
And she would literally come over for hours. So she was actually allergic to cats, but she loved them so much she would dose herself up with an antihistamine and come on over and play. So I missed that side of things. I guess I miss day-to-day things. I'm more involved in church and community than I was for a little while. So I guess I miss talking to her about that. I would have loved to share a lot more of that with her. And I'm kind of sad that I went through a stage where I wasn't going to church much and I wasn't really searching a lot for that sort of thing. And so now that I am, I'm like, she's not here to talk about it. I
Mm.
have things that I would love to share with her and I can't.
That's right.
So just recently, actually, our aunt's house burnt down, and our aunt lives, as you know, she's a solo occupant of a house. She's in her 80s. She's on her own with a cat, of course. and her house burnt down. And the first thing I thought was road trip. Have to do a road trip. I've got to go and see her. She needs a hug.
She lives on a farm?
She lives on a farm. And I just thought, you know what? She's got no husband, no kids. She's got best friends, but, there's nothing better than a family hug.
Mm.
So driving down on this road trip, which was a 4-hour road trip, I was actually excited to be doing this, but a bit sad in that Mum would have been the first one to say, hey, let's do this. I put my hand up. I'm going on that road trip. Are you coming? Not the other way around. So
That's
I
all.
was a little bit sad in that Mum would have been there with me. And I did say that to Auntie Terry. I'm like, Mum would have been the first one in the car. She would have dropped everything, been in the car and just gone down to Auntie Terry's. And there's nothing that you can do for somebody in that situation except sit there, give them a hug and say, I love you. And Mum would have been the first one to do that with me.
You just said something that just gave me chills because Mum used to say, you really know you really understand who you're with when you can sit with them in silence and it's not awkward.
I like that. That's true.
And you've just painted this picture of you just saying, you know what, Auntie Terry needs someone to just sit with her. I don't necessarily know what I'm going to say or how it's going to play out, but she just needs someone to sit with her, even if it's in silence. And Mum used to
Mm,
always say that. I've never forgotten that. And I think that's a good measure of whether you really have a good connection with a friend, because at times
mm,
I've had in my life, times where I just want to sit there and let it all pour out, and I don't really have the words. And then there's times where I've been the one sitting next to someone in that situation. And Mum, I think, instilled that. And to hear that you've done that for Auntie Terry is just beautiful. It's just powerful. It just reminds me of how much we still carry through in our own lives things that Mum taught us
mm.
just by her example, maybe more than anything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember Mum being the one to visit people after church. If they were too sick to go to church, she would visit afterwards. Now, she'd drag us kids with her, which
Oh my.
wasn't ideal for us as kids. I mean, we'd sort of, grumble under our breath, but never actually complain too hard to Mum because, she's just like, where you coming? Um, but she really instilled that sense of community. And if somebody's sick, you go to them. If they can't make it to church or they can't make it to their community, you take the community to them. And that's
Yeah.
something that I really have tried to embrace and tried to take on board for myself now as an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we've talked about this, so I'll ask it again, and maybe I haven't. But when did it hit you that we're the older generation? As we close in on that 50, that as kids we thought, man, they're old. When did it hit you that we are now that generation?
Um, just now, I'm not old. I mean, what are you talking about?
You know, uh, there you go. As Mum and Dad are gone now, we're it. We're the next ones up. Grandparents are gone, and I think for us, particularly, grandparents were gone much earlier than most people. Dad was 50 when I came around and was
Right.
47, 48, or, I think he was just about to 50 when I came around. So he was much older. So we didn't really have grandparents. And, then obviously we lost our parents, I think, much earlier than most people. A lot of people that I'm friends with now around my own age still have their parents. So has it not hit you that we're now it? We're it? Like there is no mum and dad, there are no grandparents. Like we're it.
Yeah, no, honestly, it has hit me. And I mean, over the years, I have struggled sometimes because my friends are losing their grandparents when I'm losing my parents. So
Mm.
that has actually impacted me in a huge way. Um, and also, I sort of say to my husband, and he gets a little bit frustrated with me, but I say, yes, your parents annoy the heck out of you sometimes because they need things and they ask you for things, but enjoy them while they're here because as somebody who lost their parents early, you miss them when they're gone. However, having said that, yes, we are that next generation, and I am trying to learn that what mum instilled in me, to try to carry that on as, I guess, with pride, not in a bad prideful way, but in a way, be proud of what she taught me and who she taught me to be, and try to be that.
Do you think that's why, and I'm going to say this from my perspective because I think it's true. I don't know anyone that has gone to the lengths that you have to be an auntie or an aunt, as they
Mm,
say over here.
yep. Mm.
But why do you think, or is this why you've become such an incredible auntie to so many nieces and nephews?
Yeah, I think I learnt from the best. I think I learnt from mum who to try to be. I mean, not that you want to try to be someone that you're not. I think genetically, uh, you know, we do follow a path that our parents have, and we have some sort of personality traits that our parents have. And I think I'm very much like mum, or so I'm told. Um, and mum's a very nurturing person, and I guess I never actually wanted my own children, but that's not to say that I didn't want to be a good aunt. So I think also because I didn't have my own children, I had time to put into being an aunt, if that makes sense. I mean, I know as a parent, you're stretched to the limit most of the time, whether that be time, whether that be physically being exhausted, whether that mean, you're at work a lot of the time, um, whatever that looks like. At the end of the day, you're still tied to those children and you're exhausted for a good reason. But I get to be the fun aunt who isn't tied down with their own kids, can come and go a little bit better. I can spoil them and still walk away at the end of the day going, that was fantastic. I don't have to do the hard part of the discipline. So I think being an aunt is probably a little easier than being a parent. And it's also the fun side of things, and it's a privilege rather than a chore.
Yeah, I always tried to be a really cool uncle to the girls that Ish had when I was, what was I, 12 when I became an uncle, and I just poured my life and soul into them, and that's why when they did move up to Brisbane, for those that don't know Australia, that's a 20-hour drive. It's not like a couple hours up the road. It's major interstate travel, and so I
Yeah.
couldn't see them a lot for those years, but that was heartbreaking, and so I know that my girls each have a stuffy that has their full name and their date of birth on it that they will keep for the rest of their lives. And that came from you. And I believe you've done that for other nieces and nephews.
Yeah, all the nieces and nephews have them. Just my little way of making sure that they know that they're loved right from day one.
And I think that's beautiful because I've never seen anyone else do it. And I've absolutely dropped the ball on doing that for my cousins and nieces and nephews that are still in Australia. So I've got to work on that too. But I digress there because this is about you. And I want to make sure we give you the props because, my kids sleep with them every night and they absolutely love them, and that's been important. So what do you hope over these years that the nieces and nephews remember the most or best about you?
Uh, you know what? If they if they know that they're loved. I mean, they don't have to be anyone that they're not to be loved. They each and every one of them is special in their own way for their own personalities. There's no favorites. I love them each individually. They are all different and wonderful. And I guess at the end of the day, they know that if they know that they can come to me with whatever it is, whether it be good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, if they know that they can come to me and that I will listen and do my best not to judge, but just to listen, then That's all I need.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We got so many ways I've had to pause myself as I go through this to make sure I don't chase one of these, and pull on that piece of string. But as we kind of close out towards the end of this episode, there could be 5, 6 episodes here easily, but I would like to know something that it's about your life that maybe I've never understood.
Ooh. Uh, hmm. I'm not sure because I think we have stayed connected in a way that pretty much most of everything that's gone on with me. I'm not sure that there's anything that you haven't understood that actually comes off the top of my head. And I mean, the thing is that we have stayed connected even through the distance and the time difference and all of that. And I don't know for you, but for me, sometimes I've actually had to make that a priority and remind myself, hey, I need to connect with Matt because we're not in the same city. We're not even in the same country. We don't necessarily still know the same people, but I'm going to make a conscious effort to stay connected. So I think you pretty much know most of my stuff. Unless you want to ask me something specific, I can't
No,
think
that's
of
great. I mean,
anything.
I think it's a powerful testimony over the years. There have been definitely times, for whatever reason, that there's been long gaps in connection or even seeing each other that we've talked about over the years that I, don't necessarily have with the rest of the siblings. And that's not to say I don't love them and don't care for them and wouldn't drop what I'm doing to be there for them. But there are times over my years that I've been abroad, I haven't done that. We talked about it before with your wedding and other things where I haven't done that. And so I think there have been times where I maybe could have made a better effort. And even this last couple of weeks, I've just been so buried in some things I'm working on that I haven't really made time for the family chat, certainly not you either. And so for you to jump on and do this is, very exciting for me to do this and get a little bit more information and know your heart and share that with the audience and help them understand that there's value over these years we've created, not just being brother and sister, but tremendous value in maintaining that. So is there anything the audience could be surprised about that you could share, maybe something they don't know or something I haven't shared or something you remember that they would be, oh, wow, I didn't know that?
Ah, let me think. Um, Trying to think of I don't know whether there's any stories that I'm allowed to tell or I don't know. I think just the growing up as siblings. Basically, you can make it or break it. You can be best friends. You can do things together that you can't do with necessarily your friends, whatever. Um, I don't know. I think also just the fact that you share parents and you go through a lot as siblings when your parents pass that nobody else can necessarily understand because each family is so different that you have a different perspective of parents, personalities, all of that sort of thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's a tough one. And again, I didn't give you these questions and things that I wanted to really dig in on in advance. And that's because I want the answers to be authentic. And you've been very authentic the whole time and shared honestly and openly. And it's not easy because I remember when Dad died, I was on a plane and I was back home. And then 4 days after being home, I got back on a plane and came back to the States. But with Mum, she passed during COVID. There was a lockdown. I couldn't get into the country. And even if I could, I would have been in a hotel for 2 weeks
Mm.
getting food slid under a door until I was quarantined and then get out. And so I remember watching Mum's funeral via a laptop, sitting on my bed, just thinking, what the I won't say it because I've tried to keep my podcast clean, but WTF. I'm watching
Mhm.
my mum's funeral on a laptop because I get on a plane tomorrow, but by the time I get there, she's buried, everyone's come and gone. And so that's just a real open end for me. There's just that unfinished business, and they never got to see me be a dad. And I think Mum would have really, I can't speak for Mum. I just would have loved to seen me, make it out the other side of a divorce and
Mhm.
have kids and get to be a dad. And those are the things that I wish I had. And there's a lot of times where our conversations and your visits here have created just a small relief from that disappointment. As you said earlier, Mum was an empath. You're an empath. I'm learning over the years that I've not really understood who I was either and going down the same direction. And hence that's part of why this podcast exists, is to help other people on a bigger scale. And that's the heart of it at the end of the day. But you've helped bridge the gap from losing Mum to being able to press on. And that's been really tough for me. So I, want to thank you officially and privately as well. I think we've talked a little bit about that, but you've been able to do that by visiting, by coming over. We've recorded some really funny videos when you were here last, and I've got some up my sleeve that I think I'll use to promote this episode. And you've always put yourself out there for me, even if we haven't always seen eye to eye on certain things, and that's okay, because I know who I am, you know who you are, and I think Mum and Dad raised, some pretty good kids, all of us, really. And so as I think all of that through, if Mum and Dad could listen, or maybe they are, we don't fully understand how it works, but if they're listening to this conversation today, looking at their kids, siblings, and all the rivalries that we had, the biting, the punching, the having baths together, right, hating each other, and all that sort of stuff, what do you think, what do you hope you think they would be thinking right now?
Oh, no, they'd be proud of both of us. Actually, they'd be proud of all of us and who we've become and what we've taken on board of what they've had to offer. Um, I think they would really love seeing you being a dad, for starters. I mean, mum was always all about the kids because she's like,
Yeah.
adults look after each other, adults have got each other. Mum was all about the kids and making sure the kids were okay. So she would have loved to have watched you with your kids and just seen how they develop, their personalities, who they were going to become. She would have been so excited to be a part of that journey that you're on. So that's probably for starters. Secondly, she would have been there encouraging you every step of the way because that's who she was. Um, Dad would have been there to fill in the gaps of, again, the goofy side of things. I mean, Dad wasn't there for the deep and meaningfuls. Dad was there for the fun. Um, he would have been encouraging them in, kicking a football around if he could. And Dad would have been super proud of you as well. Um, so I think, if Mum and Dad were still here, they'd be pretty happy. They'd be involved as much as possible. They would travel backwards and forwards as much as, they would have been able to. And they would have just stayed current with everything that's going on and as involved as much as possible, really.
And I think, to speak to that, I think they'd be definitely proud of who you've become through that divorce as well, because I know you touched on a little bit where if it was 2021 when Mum passed and your divorce was 20 years before that, you really were in a bit of a wilderness there for quite a while, at least in being involved. Not saying you didn't have a faith or believe. That's certainly not what I'm saying, but I can relate to that very much after being divorced. It really, knocks the wind out of you because of our upbringing. And I think that would be particularly fond to see both of us testing the narrative, digging in on some things. I think Mum would have been a good sounding board. So I definitely hope that in some way, shape, or form they're able to know what we're doing here and see value in it. I appreciate you being on. I know that we wrestled with this for a while. I think a while back when I was really not sure if I was going to even keep the podcast going. We did bounce back and forth on some things, and you didn't necessarily encourage me one way or the other, but ultimately, here we are, 15, 16 episodes, later, and it's been an absolute blast. The more I thought about whether we'd pull it off or not, the more I realized that life is way too short, and in the blink of an eye, things can change, and we can live with regrets, right? We've been divorced. We've gone through things where it hasn't necessarily gone the way we thought it would. Plan hasn't unfolded, and I wanted to make sure that there was never going to be that regret of sitting down with you. Not that it had to be recorded, but just putting it on record, having some time where we can always look back, no matter what it looks like moving forward, and be able to say, right, look at what we did, and maybe there's some people out there that can get some value from it. And so this episode's been an incredibly challenging one for me to kind of understand, where do I want to take it? Where's the value for the people listening? And so today's episode's meant a tremendous amount to me. That's not something you can really put into words. It's obviously hard to articulate, like some of the questions I've asked you. You're probably going to have some answers later on that you wish, man, I wish I could go back and talk on that. But, we're an hour and a half in already. And so I just want to thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing, being transparent, being authentic, which I asked you right before we went on the air. Try and be as honest as you can. We laugh together, cry together, whatever it looks like. We put it out there. We go down that path, and we could definitely have more episodes of it moving forward because there's so much to unpack there. But most people might know you as Auntie Nay, right?
Right.
And it started when I think one of the visits you had out here, I started calling you Auntie Nanny. And of course, that's in reference to Mum, who was Nanny and Pa.
Right.
And so Auntie Nanny just sort of stuck. And, to be honest with you, I don't have any plans on letting that change anytime soon because every time the girls say Auntie Nanny, of course, it's just a little reminder. It keeps Mum's presence and who she was alive, in a fun, simple type, way that I think is beautiful. Hopefully, whether it was intentional or not, it's just one of those things that I think Yahweh put together for us. And over the time that we originally thought about doing this to now, I don't think it's any mistake that this conversation, whether you realize it or not, has become episode 57.
Oh, wow. Mum's favorite number.
Correct.
Oh, my goodness. That sends chills down my spine.
Yeah, I got chills, and I knew I was going to say it. So that's, to
Wow.
me, just how powerful it's become when a lot of the times I don't have the episode in mind before I record it. I don't plan things out. I speak from the heart. I speak about what I'm going through in my life. And so for this to become episode 57, I think we can easily say it's a episode in remembrance of Mum and Dad, of course. And we can look back on them with gratitude. We can look back on our brothers and sisters with gratitude that Mum and Dad gave us brothers and sisters. And I was lucky enough to, make it into those top 5. And it's an honor to them, to the family that they raised. We're not all perfect. We don't all get along. We don't see eye to eye and everything. But at the end of the day, I think they did a really good job, and I'm blessed to have them. And so I don't get to say this, or I've never said this to any of my previous guests, and probably none moving forward, but I love you, Nay.
You
And
too.
thank you for being on, and for everybody that's out there listening, because this has definitely been a tough episode for me in some ways. I've kept it together better than I maybe have in the past episodes. But this has been a very special and rare strength to overcome episode that will probably never be repeated. It certainly can't be repeated with anybody that I'm closer to than my sister Nay. And that's not to say I can't get close to my other siblings, but we've been tight for nearly 48 years now. And so if you've got a brother, if you've got a sister, we talked about this, Nay, but I'm going to encourage everybody to reach out, give them a call, tell them you love them. Doesn't have to kickstart anything that's different, but I think there's something, like you said early on, there's a unique strand between siblings that is different than any other relationship, and whatever that means to anybody that's listening, Have a conversation. It might be ugly, it might be pretty, who knows, but maybe, just maybe, Nay and myself have helped anyone out there take that next step, reach out, and maybe gain some value from something that maybe happened in the past, rekindle something, or just let them know, even if you never hear back, just let them know you love them and that they do mean something to you, because no matter what the sibling rivalries look like, how much I bit you, Nay, I apologize again. At the end of the day, we are brothers and sisters, and so I appreciate you being on the show and sharing with that, and hopefully the audience has gained some value from hearing your testimony and my perspective of being the youngest brother.
It's been my pleasure to be a part of this, and honestly, I love you too. That's all I've got.
Appreciate it, everyone. Share it with someone and get it out there for us. In the meantime, we will catch everyone next week. Stay strong. Cheers.